Tov, Be'ezrat Hashem, Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah. Perek Shelishi, I recommended that we skip over due to the fact that it is based on what one could refer to as archaeology of astronomy. In other words, ancient and incorrect perceptions and assumptions regarding the workings of the heavens that we observe. And therefore I do not think it is very helpful to study Perek Shelishi. Perek Revi'i is also based on the incorrect but widely held view in the past regarding the Arba' Yesodot, the four elements of fire, wind or air, water, and earth. That all things are made up of those four elements in different combinations and permutations. And this too, as we know, is not correct. In the Machon Namre edition, it is Halakha Yod Gimel, or in other editions, Halakha Zay. Rambam says, "Le'olam enata ro'eh golem below surah, or surah below golem." The word golem refers to the physical material of which a being is, of which it is made, and the surah is the essence of the thing that essentially defines its essential character and nature. Rambam discussed this, if you recall, in Perek Sheni, the second chapter. As Rambam writes in Perek Sheni Halakha Gimel, if you look there for one moment, there Rambam wrote, Kol ma shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olamo, everything that Hashem created in his world, in the created world, nahalak lishlosha halakim, can be divided into three categories. Mehem beroim shehem mehubarim migolem usura, those beings that consist of a golem, physical material of some nature, and thura, which is the inner essence which defines that thing and decides or results in its essential nature and character, as we have discussed before, which we know is largely encoded in the DNA. And Rambam says, "Wahem nehawim v'nifsadim tamid," and these things, because they're based on a physical body, they constantly come into existence, and they also cease to exist, such as such as human beings and animals and plants, etc. And also Rambam says matachot, which means metals or elements, things that can be found in the ground. They also deteriorate. For example, iron oxidizes, rusts, and eventually crumbles and disappears after a long time, perhaps. Rambam continues, and beings that consist of these two things, they also consist of a golem of some material, physical material, and some surah, some spiritual essence, shall we say. But they do not, they're not nearly as limited in their lifespan or in their ability to continue to exist for extremely long periods of time. Rambam here says, "Ela suratham kivu'a begolmam le'olam." Their existence with that combination of the surah, of the essence of the thing and the material of that thing, are kavua, they are fixed. We'enam mishtanim kamo'el, they do not change. Wehem galgalim, Rambam refers here to the celestial spheres or wheels, as was understood at that time, and the stars are kochavim shebahim. In other words, they thought that the stars, the planets, were embedded in these celestial the celestial machine, which consists of these various wheels and moving parts, something like a watch, an old-fashioned watch, if you like, if you remember how such watches work, or how they look. It's like trying to explain to some children nowadays why a phone icon looks the way it does, usually, because they've never seen a phone that looks like that. And then there are things, Rambam says in the next halacha, that they are only a thura, they only have a spiritual essence and existence and no physical body, such as malachim, angels, etc. All right, so that was in Perek Sheni. So now we return to Perek Revi'it, the 4th chapter. And Rambam says here in halacha zayin or yud gimel, le'olam ein ata ro'eh golem belo thura or thura belo golem. אלא לב האדם הוא שמחלק הגוף הנמצא בדעתו, ויודע שהוא מחובר מגולם וסורה, ויודע שיש שם גופים שגולמם מחובר מארבע יסודות, וגופים שגולמם פשוט, ולא מחובר מגולם אחר. And it is the human intellect which allows us to perceive these various types of created beings and objects, and we know that this consists of both a physical material of some type and also some spiritual essence which is not perceived by our senses, with regards to some of those created beings and objects, and others that we know that are purely a thura, only the physical, the spiritual essence of that thing and nothing more. Those things that do not have a physical body cannot be perceived by our senses. We do not see them. Literally with the eye of the heart. In other words, by means of our understanding and intellect, we perceive, we know these things. Just as we perceive or we understand that Hashem exists without being able to see him. Rambam now continues in halacha heth or yod daled. Nephesh kol basar hi suratho shenatan lo ha'el. The nephesh, the surah of any living organism is what we also refer to as the nephesh of that being. So this also applies to animals, etc. They also have a nephesh. The nephesh, the makeup of a cat is different from that of a dog in terms of its instincts, its behavior, its even the way it perceives the world to some extent is different. Not to mention it, the various capabilities that different animals have. One runs fast and one runs more slowly, and the other one has keener hearing than another, or keener eyesight than another. These are all part of this synthesis of the Nephesh, the Surah, and the Homer of that creature. But even these creatures, even though they're not sentient, they have a Nephesh, they have that life force and those capabilities and instincts which define what it is. The extra dimension of the human being, which is the intellectual and spiritual capacity of a human being, he surat adam hashalem bid'ato. That is the surah of a human being, properly described, and when the human being is healthy and functioning properly. That is what is unique about the human being, different from and separate from and distinct from all other living organisms. And with regards to this surah, this spiritual and intellectual dimension of the human being, it says in the Torah, Hashem says that we shall, Rashon is actually the plural, Rashon kavod, just as in many languages when one speaks to someone that one is required to show, to whom one is required to show respect, the normal thing to do is to speak to the person in the plural, such as in German, shall we say, or Yiddish or other languages. To a person that you do not know very well, or a person that you must respect and show deference, you speak in the plural, even though there's only one person standing before you. Whereas to a person on your level, or a good friend or someone, you speak in the singular. So in the Torah here also, we shall create a human being. What does that mean? Rambam says, Kolomar, Shetielo Surah Hayodat, Umaseret Hadeot She'enehem Golem. We shall create a being that has da'ath, in other words, has the ability to perceive things and understand things that are not physical in nature, that have no golem, have no physical being. In other words, that he himself will be a being that has a spiritual and intellectual dimension to him, beyond his physical corporeal existence. When it says the Salmeno Kidmuteno, it is not speaking about the physical form of the human being that we perceive with our eyes. Shehu HaPeh HaHopen, in other words, the mouth and the nose and the Halasathot, the jaws, the face. Usha'ar Roshem HaGuf. All of that is referred to as Shazot Ta'ar Shema. Rambam says that is referred to as by the Hebrew word in the Torah, Ta'ar. For instance, we see with regards to Sarah Imeno, she's described as being Yefath Ta'ar, right? In other words, beautiful in appearance. So the physical form of the human being is not what's being referred to by these two words, Salem and Demuth. Rather, it refers to the spiritual essence, the Torah, that defines a human being. It's interesting to note, I think, that this is topical and relevant. It's always relevant, but at this particular time, I know that in the United States, it seems that the Supreme Court wishes to discuss abortion once again. And it's interesting to note that those who support what they define as the right to an abortion, when you ask them why is it okay, why is it not immoral or sinful or wrong to kill this as yet unborn but clearly living being that has a beating heart and what have you, they would usually claim that that's not a human being. The fact that there is a heart and a brain and what have you, and all the organs and various aspects of the human body, the fact that these things exist and can even be shown to be functioning, and the heart beats, and you can see this. This is not the definition. This is not how we define a human being, they will tell you. Why? Because this human being as yet does not speak. It does not, as far as we know, at this point, perceive, have any great intellectual or spiritual perception or understanding. And therefore, it's not a human being. In other words, as soon as it's born, by the way, they would agree that one cannot kill a born baby, but at some point before it passes through the birth canal, somehow it's on a different level, which is not very clear. But the fact is that you see that they also perceive that the essence of the human being is the spiritual and intellectual essence of the human being. I'm not saying that means that one can kill an unborn baby. I'm saying that such people admit to the fact that the human being how they wish to define a human being is based on the perception that a human being is not just a physical being, in the same way that animals are just purely physical and do not have any higher functions. So Rambam says, when Eina HaNefesh, this is the halacha heth or teth well, Eina HaNefesh HaMesuya L'chol Nefesh Haya. But when we speak about this surah or this nefesh of the human being, we're not referring to what we refer to also as the nephesh with regards to other living creatures. Sheba ochel v'shoteh u'molid u'margish u'maharher. All living organisms, certainly the higher organisms. Again, shall we say a cat or a dog or a giraffe or an elephant, they eat and they drink. They have to ingest food and water, and they reproduce, and they feel and they see, and they also perceive on a certain level. They even have very finely tuned instincts. They can frequently be aware of impending danger before we are. And that is all rooted in the nephesh of that creature. But that's not what we're talking about here with regards to the human being. We're talking here about the de'ah, says Rambam. Ela ha-de'ah, shehi surat ha-nefesh. We're talking here about that aspect of the human being that is unique to the human being, which has to do with the ability to contemplate and understand abstract ideas, which also refers to human ability to investigate the physical world, understand it, science. It also very particularly refers to mathematics, which is really a human invention, as it were, or something that human beings are uniquely capable of. And of course, anything to do with the spiritual realm. This is the Da'an, this is the Surat HaNefesh that is unique to the human being. So Rambam says, Ela HaDa'a Shehi Surat HaNefesh, or the Surat HaNefesh HaKathul Medaber. That is what's being referred to when it says, Na'asa Adam B'Thalmenu Kidmuthenu. Ufa'amim Raboth Tikare HaSurah Nefesh Waruah. And frequently it is referred to either with the term Nefesh or with the term Ruah. Precisely because Ruah, air or wind, even in the most basic sense, is also something that's close to being non-physical in the sense that you cannot grab the air, you cannot, technically we actually can weigh air, that's true, but it's almost imperceptible. So therefore we use that terminology for other things that cannot be perceived with the senses. And therefore one has to be precise when using these terms, that we should not use the wrong term and confuse the issue. And each of these terms will be understood from the context and from the way it is being used. Rambam continues, Halakha Taif. or Tetzain. En Surat HaNefesh Hazot Muhubarat Minha Yesodot. So as opposed to what Rambam described earlier in this chapter about the four elements that all physical beings, all physical objects consist of these four elements that we mentioned earlier at the beginning of this chapter, fire, air, water, and earth. This is, of course, an ancient Greek conception, and perhaps there were those before the ancient Greeks also came up with something along these lines. Rambam says the nephesh of the human being, the de'ah that we're referring to, is not made up of these. Seeing that it is not made up of these four elements, it therefore does not cease to exist and deteriorate and decompose, such as other physical objects and creatures that consist of these four elements. When the Rambam uses the term neshama, he is talking about the life force of the physical being, of the human being. which is particularly connected to the breathing, and as the Talmud discusses in Masechet Yoma and other places, that if one wants to check if a person is alive, one checks to see if they're breathing. It's not possible to be alive and not breathe for any length of time. And the word neshama is, of course, very similar to the word neshima, which means breathing. Neshima in Hebrew is breathing or breath. Neshama, as Rambam uses the term here, refers to that and to the essential life force of the physical body. So this Nephesh, this surah of this basic essence of the human being is neither the physical being, nor is it the essential life force which permeates that physical being, the body. This is something from above that is placed into the human being, into the human being's physical being. As it says explicitly in the Torah, that Hashem breathed into man this breath of life, literally. So when the body begins to break up and ceases to exist, and then begins to decompose, which consists of these four elements, or as we know, many different elements, but it consists of material elements. With the life force leaves it. This life force only exists as long as the body exists, as long as the body is functional and viable, and the neshama, the life force, exists. So that, for example, if a person drowns in water, this does not allow the life force to continue, and therefore the body now is bereft of this life force. This is what Rambam calls here neshama, and also has to do with breathing. One cannot breathe underwater. This life force is intimately connected with the body. When that ceases to exist, what we refer to generally as the Nephesh, or using a different set of terms, often referred to nowadays as the neshama, in other words, the soul of the human being, this does not end when the physical being ends. This spiritual essence of the human being, the soul, does not require the body to exist, nor does it require breath. It doesn't require any sustenance of any kind. This spiritual essence of the human being has its own existence, its own independent existence, and therefore it perceives all manner of things, including spiritual beings, and is aware of Hashem, the creator of all, and exists eternally. And this is what is stated in Sefer Kohelet, Perek Yud Bet, V'yashov Ha'afar al ha'aretz keshehaya. The dust will return to the earth as it was. V'haruach tashuv el ha'elohim asher nathana. But the spirit returns to Hashem who gave it, who brought it down, as it were, into the world and connected it to this physical body. That doesn't cease to exist. It separates and exists in a different realm. Rambam now continues. Halacha Yod or Yod Zayin. Kol ha'devarim ha'elu shedibarnu be'inyan zeh. All that we have discussed in these chapters. Kamar midalihem. This is based on the lashon of the pasuk. In other words, it means like if you have a bucket of water, a dali, and you empty it out, there's always going to be some drop of water left at the bottom, which takes a long time, a lot of effort to completely dry and remove. So it's a very tiny amount it's an insignificant amount of information or understanding that we've discussed here, says Rambam. It's like that which is left in the bucket after you empty it. Udvarim amukimhim, and these are profound and deep things. But they are not on the same level of profundity as that which we discussed in the first and the second chapter. As you recall, the first and the second chapter, we discussed the existence of Hashem and how we cannot directly experience Hashem, and also the basic parameters of our relationship with Hashem, that we are required to love Hashem and to fear Hashem, etc. Those things are deeper and more profound, says Rambam, than what we discussed here. And the things discussed in the third and fourth chapter of Hilchot Yesodei Torah. This is what is referred to by Hazal as Ma'aseh Bereshit, which Rambam defines in his Perush on the Mishneh Masechet Hagirah as natural science. In other words, the science and investigation of understanding of the physical world. And thus instructed us the ancient Chachamim, the sages, She'en Dorashim Gam Bidvarim Ha'elu Barabim. These things too are not to be explained and discussed with the general public. These things are to be taught on an individual basis to the right type of person, the right kind of student. As you will recall, at the end of Perek Beth, Rambam spoke about the things discussed in the first two chapters. Rambam also said, he says here at the end of Perek Beth, Udvarim elu, Davarim amukim hem adlim ma'od. These things are very profound and deep, difficult for most people to conceive of. And not every person is capable of discussing and trying to conceive of these things, to wrap their minds around these things. And thus, Chachamim said with regards to such things that they should be kevosim lilabushecha. In other words, and kevosim is referring to sheep, but it is read as if it's with a shin in this drasha. So therefore, davarim shehem kivshono shel ha'olam, things that are hidden and that are, as it were, hidden above in the heavens and beyond the average human being's capabilities and also the average person's inclination is not attuned to such things. Such things, they should be only for you, like your clothing, which is just yours. And do not discuss them in public with an audience of people that you have not first, with whom you are not familiar. You have to know with whom you discuss these things. Rambam said earlier, prior to this statement at the end of Halakha Bet, Rambam also said that these things, referring to the first two chapters, which is what Rambam described as being Ma'aseh Merkava, that which was referred to by Hazal as Ma'aseh Merkava. These things should only be taught Le'isha had bilavad, to one person at a time. Wahu sheyeh hacham u'mevin mida'ato, and that has to be a person who has the intellectual and spiritual capacity to understand. And even then, only one only hints at certain things briefly, and the rest is for the person to understand, to extrapolate from that and understand himself. Today, it should be pointed out that we know, certainly with regards to Ma'aseh V'Reshit, as Rambam describes it here. In other words, an understanding of the physical world. We, Baruch Hashem, possess today a much greater, infinitely greater level of understanding. If we take, for example, that which we have understood since the 1950s, regarding DNA, for example, which we are constantly, our knowledge of and understanding of these things is constantly increasing. Also, not to say that sometimes certain scientists imagine certain things that we then discover later are not true, or they made an assumption which was not based on very much. But we understand a tremendous amount that could not possibly have been understood in the past. So the fact is, many aspects of Ma'aseh V'Reshit today are available for many more people. A much higher proportion of human beings are capable of knowing and understanding quite a lot about these things. Here too, of course, even when the information is available, it's not for everybody. As we said before, it's not, if a person's inclination is not such, or if the person doesn't have the intellectual wherewithal to deal with such things, then the information might be there, but he won't know it, or it won't register with him. But yes, we can understand a tremendous amount, and this is important, as Rambam is about to say in a moment. So in which way do we distinguish between these two fields of study, these two areas of study, Ma'aseh Merkava, Ma'aseh Bereshit? She'inyan Ma'aseh Merkava, afilu lehav en dorashim bo. With regards to Ma'aseh Merkava, which is theology and the relationship between the created universe and Hashem, afilu lehav en dorashim bo. This is not to be taught even to the individual. Ela im ken haya hacham umevi mida'ato mosarim lo roshei haperakim. This is to be taught in a very telegraphic and cryptic way, only to unique individuals, not more. Wa'inyan Ma'aseh V'Reshit, with regards to Ma'aseh V'Reshit, which, as we said, Rambam defines as natural science, understanding the created world. This is taught the individual, even though he does not understand it off his own bat. In other words, he would not have understood these things were he not taught. But if you teach them, he understands. And to such a person, all that he is capable of understanding can be taught. So again, with reference to our situation today, to the right kind of person, a true, honest, intellectually honest, and also I would add the word humble study of science, the natural world, is very important, very powerful, and can lead, without doubt, to a tremendous feeling of awe and appreciation of the Bria and of the Bore, particularly. Rambam says in a moment. Why is these things not taught in public? Because not all people can fully understand these things correctly. Am I correct in thinking that you have to go to Tefillah now?
We have it soon. Yeah. In the meantime, I'd like to ask a question. How do you draw the line between what's taught now and what is Maaser Bereshit? Like, even science that's taught in children's schools, would that qualify? Information that's easily available online. Where do you draw the line of what can and can't be taught to others?
I'm not sure that you can draw the line when it comes to scientific investigation. I think it largely depends on the person. As I said before, a lot of information is available, but many people will not avail themselves of that information. And even if you present it to them, it really will not make any impression on them. They'll say, it doesn't interest me, or it's boring, or it's what have you. So such people will simply not take an interest. People who do understand, who are capable and wish to understand, will understand because that information is available, broadly available. We cannot hide it. Scientific endeavor cannot be hidden. It's in the public domain. It's there for all to see. What is unfortunately true is that many people scientists, shall we say, not all, but some scientists, or people who turn science into a religion, for them it can serve the opposite purpose, rather than imbuing in them a sense of awe and a desire to connect to Hashem, as Rambam is about to discuss here. To them, science is the very thing that frees them, as it were, of any need to discuss a creator, because we know science, we see how this works, so we understand, and therefore we don't need God. God is for those people who didn't have science. We have science, so we don't need God. That is a tragic and not to mention very, very haughty and childish even understanding of our level of knowledge. No scientist can tell you, despite the best but fairly pathetic efforts of some, to tell you how the universe began without a creator. I think Stephen Hawking discussed a quantum fluctuation in a non-existent reality. Well, okay, if you understand that, that's fine. But that's just a play on words. That's simply skirting the issue. You don't know, so just say you don't know. But he couldn't say that, and that's part of the pride of such people. They refuse to admit that. Well, we have no idea really how anything could begin without a creator. Essentially, the Big Bang theory, which is almost universally accepted. I don't think there's any serious scientist who rejects it today. Forces one to understand that there was a beginning, and if there's a beginning, you have to ask yourself, how did it begin? Who made it begin? Some people do not want to address that issue. It makes them uncomfortable. That already has a lot to do with human pride. It has to do with psychology, and I'm not a psychologist, but but there's clearly a problem there. So science should really lead us to Hashem, but it can also, if one approaches life and existence and science and everything from the precisely the wrong angle, it can actually lead you away from. And that is tragically true. That is why in some parts of the Torah world, many people prefer to know little about science and not know and not study such things, because they see it's not a Torah perspective to think or to view things in such a way, but they see that there are many people who study these things, are involved in these endeavors, and instead of bringing them to Hashem, it leads them away from Hashem, and it creates a human being that imagines that he is omnipotent and omniscient almost, and the pinnacle of reality without anything at all being above him. And that's a sad and tragic and even dangerous reality. But in truth, it should not lead us to shun science and knowledge. Quite the opposite. Just it has to be used and perceived and appreciated for what it is. Okay, we'll stop here. Kol tov lachem.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org. If you are inspired by Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to get involved in Torah Eretz Yisrael activities in your local area, please fill out the relevant form by going to the link which appears on the screen.